I'm Ella Gordon and I'm a knitter, designer, and I also work here at Jamieson & Smith. So today I'm going to show you how I swatch for Fair Isle knitting. So why would we swatch? Well, most of the time people swatch for gauge. So you would knit a small section of your pattern and then wash it, whatever, and then you can measure your gauge to check that you're getting the right amount of stitches and rows per inch. Now, a lot of Shetlanders don't swatch, we kind of just go in and go for it, but there is merits in doing it, I think, for certain things like Fair Isle. So I've got some stuff here that you can see that I've done, and this is kind of how I do my swatches. So things like, I did this little jumper, which was in the Wool Week annual 2 years ago or 3 years ago. And then this is the little swatch I did first. So it's also, swatching can be quite good for things like yokes, because you can test out any decreasing that you do to make sure that it works properly. And quite often, yeah, if I'm doing a yoke like this, my Ola yoke, I'll do a little swatch and then incorporate your little tree as well. And it just makes a nice little swatch, I think, for after. What other ones? Yeah, so quite often you're doing it really for the colours, to make sure that the colours you've chosen or the colours you're thinking about do work out. And like on this one, this hat, which is my Trony hat pattern, when I was doing the swatch, I wasn't sure if I wanted to go from dark to light or from light to dark. So when I did the swatch, I did both. For the bottom half, I went light to dark, and then the top half, I went light to dark that way. And then that way you can look and see which one you prefer, and I prefer dark to light, so that was what I went for. And so I've got a little swatch that I did, and we're going to work on another one as well, but I'll show you with one that's not curling up. But so what I usually do is I cast on your pattern repeat and then add on about 4 or 5 stitches either side. So like for this one, we're doing this pretty one, the pattern repeat is 31 stitches. So you've got your pattern repeat and then I've got 5 stitches either side. So you cast that on, and you can do it on either, I mean, for this kind of size, you know, it's quite small, so you don't need a big, a long needle to do it on. So I usually use either 20 centimetre double pointed needles or a 40 centimetre circular needle. And, well, I'll get into it as we go. But you're working, yeah, so you cast on, do your stitches then with your extra, and then you do about 4 or 5 rows of garter stitch, just working back and forth the whole time. And then you go into your pattern, and what you do is you work across and then you break the yarn at both sides, because when you're swatching, you need to do the swatch in the same way that you would do the finished garment. So for instance, if your finished garment was knitted flat, you do your swatch flat, and if it's knit in the round, you do your swatch in the round. And by breaking the yarn at both sides, you're only knitting from the front, which is replicating what you're doing when you're knitting in the round. So, I've got this, so this is another little one I've done. And it is, I mean, it's, while you're doing it, this kind of thing, it doesn't take a long time. I think that's what puts people off swatching quite a lot. You think, oh, okay, it's going to take me ages and I've got to do whatever. But I think before you put in, you know, all the time to do something that's all over Fair Isle, and if you get to the end of it and you're like, I wish I hadn't used that colour. Well, you can kind of avoid that by doing, you know, an hour or just over an hour's work. So I do think for Fair Isle it is worth it. Right, so let me get this little chart. Turn it the right way. Okay, so where am I at? Okay, so we're on this row 11. And of course, because the main thing I knit with is 2-ply jumper weight from Jamieson Smith, everything here is done in that. I kind of know where I'm starting with needle size wise. I always do my Fair Isle on 3.5mm needles, and then if I was doing plain, I would use 3mm needle. So this is a 3.5. And yeah, so we're here at the end. Yeah, I've got 5 stitches. So do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I always put a marker in just to keep you right, because obviously you don't always have your contrast colour at the beginning. This time I do though. So here's 1, 2, 3. And then we'll just do this. What did I said row 11, but that was not true. 10, 11, 12, row 13. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1. So I do, when I'm knitting Fair Isle, I have the background colour on this finger and then the pattern colour on my middle finger. And you want to be, it doesn't really matter what way you do it, but you just want to make sure you're consistent the whole way through. Okay, we get to the end. 1, 2, 3, and then your 5 plain stitches at the end. Okay, so then you just break it off. And then start again. So it is, it's just a lot of stopping and starting, but once you get into a flow, I can kind of fly through it pretty fast. And having those, because it does get a bit loosey-goosey at the side, but you, as long as you have those extra stitches, I'm not paying attention. 1 plain line. And that is the thing, with all the stop and starting, you can kind of get out of your way of how you would be holding the yarn. So you just have to keep paying attention to what you're doing to make sure you are always holding it the way you want to. 1, 2, 3, 1. And for the garter stitch at the beginning, like you can see this one is kind of flipping up a bit. And sometimes if I'm really being good and I want it to be like a really nice swatch. Maybe if you were doing a design or something for somebody and they wanted to see an example and you want your swatch to be, you know, the best looking that it can be, then for the garter stitch I would like go down a needle size so that it was like it didn't flip up or that just sat really nice. But you'll see when, because we'll wash that other little swatch and you can see once you wash it and block it, it looks pretty good anyway, but it can, see that again, I'm too busy chatting. That one, I very rarely talk when I'm knitting, so it's kind of blowing my mind a little bit. 1, 2, 4, 5. And again. So I suppose to me this way of doing it has a lot of positives. I suppose the one negative that it does have is once, you know, sometimes you can swatch and then you could take it back and reuse the yarn if you needed to. Obviously with this, breaking it at both ends, you can't reuse it. So it is kind of a one and done thing. I mean, luckily, obviously I have a giant stash that will never run out. So, but yeah, it does. So I would kind of swatch quite, like I'd be quite sure that I like the colours and what they're going to be like. And really the swatching is just to make sure that I am going down the right path. And sometimes I'll start a swatch and get so far, and then if I don't like it, I'll just stop because there's no point in finishing it if I know that it's not. Or you can, you know, do a couple of plain rows and then start again, or you can just start a whole nother one again when you've changed your colours. So we'll do this, because for instance, this this little swatch that I'm doing, the one I did before, I've done it with these little blues, and then I've gone for more kind of natural colours. And I could tell you if I was going to make this into something, I wouldn't go for this colour I've used for the light. That's shade 78. I wouldn't use it because it's too close to the background colour 202. You can see how much more the middle row stands out on this one. So it all has its purposes. You know, sometimes you have an idea and you're thinking, oh, that's going to be amazing. And then once you do the swatch, you think, actually, no, I don't like it. So then you can change it and make something a bit brighter, a bit better. Right, so we'll just do this plain row. And yeah, this always working, you're always working from the front, so it'll give you the exact same gauge as if you were knitting in the round. You just don't want to, it can be kind of tempting when you're doing, like working on quite a small thing to knit quite tight, but you need to try and relax and do it as if you were knitting the thing and you're sitting on your little chair in the back garden, just relaxing and knitting. Because you want to replicate as much as you can how you will knit the finished thing. And it can give you an idea that you're needing to go up a needle size, down a needle size. And then of course for the old favourite, the gauge, you do need to know if you're working from a pattern that's already done, somebody else's pattern, then you do your swatch and you can see that you're using the right needle size. Because if you use the wrong needle size, it'll either come out too big or too small, and that's just a pain when you've spent all that time and money. Okay, so here we are again at the end. And what I'll do, although I've still got 2 rows to do, but I'll just pretend that they don't exist. And we'll just go on to this garter stitch. So you just turn it around and do as many rows of garter stitches as you want. You want to do at least 2 or 3, just to kind of give it a, I'll take out these markers as I come across them. So you want to give it some kind of, just an edge for stability, and also it looks nice, I think. But it's funny, yeah, I mean, when it comes to choosing colours, I love colours, and I work quite often, I can see like when I'm looking at all the swatches, quite often in the same kind of colour family. And obviously, I mean, I've worked here for nearly 10 years, so I know the jumper weight colours off the back, like off the top of my head, and think when I'm making something, oh, this would look good with 202 or whatever. So I do, yeah, I do go back to a lot of the same colours, but I think it's just a good skill to have. I think you can quickly knit up a swatch and see you're on the right path. Right, so we're getting to the end here. Okay, and let's pretend that I've done more rows of garter stitch. And then, so for casting off, I just do the basic cast off. Not when I'm doing my real things, then I do a kind of more, but I just, so knit 2 and then pass 1 over and try and do it. I kind of pull down this edge and pass it over and try and be quite loose, because my casting off is always a lot tighter as my casting on, so you kind of want it to be pretty balanced, so your swatch has the same kind of edges at the top and at the bottom. I'm saying all this and it seems like I would never see myself as a detail-oriented person, but obviously the way I do this is quite, I like them all to be very regimented and follow the same thing. Alright, so we're getting there. And another thing you can do as well, if you're not sure about your colours, is you could knit about half the swatch, or like for something like this, you could knit to the middle row and then just take a photo of it on your phone or iPad or whatever and crop it, and then you can kind of flip it and flip it over, so then you'll kind of get a picture of a whole thing without having to knit the whole thing. That I only do that if I'm like about halfway through and I'm not totally sure, because sometimes you do need to do the whole thing and then you're like, okay, actually, yeah. Or you need to kind of live with it for a while. Sometimes I'll do a swatch and then if I'm like, I don't hate it, but I don't love it, I'm not sure, then I'll have like a pin board and I'll just like pin it up and just leave it and then keep looking at it every now and again, because sometimes you also lose it by being too close to it. You know, if you're keeping on doing it and you're like, does it work? And you're like getting too, if you have it pinned up and far away from you, that kind of gives you the same idea, I suppose, that you would get with a garment or somebody being. And also, that's another thing you can do photo-wise, is you can take a photo, just what I did with this one for the Radiant Star. Like, I took a photo of the swatch, and then, I can't remember, there's like different, you know, there's loads of free apps and stuff, and you could, and you can take a photo and you can like rub out the background, and then you can just repeat the thing and up or down, especially for something like this, which is actually an all over pattern. You know, this middle yellow bit and the blue bit either side, the blue bit, when they're stacked on top of each other, they then make another pattern too. Yeah, so ones like this, the yellow bit in the middle, that is a motif, and then the blue bit at the top and at the bottom, that is also a motif, and you need to kind of repeat it up and down to see that it is how you like. So you can do that too, because I will do whatever I can do to make things easier for myself. So if I can do something, take photos and yeah, check, then I will do that too. Okay, so we're nearly to the end. And with all this ends, we'll look at the different ways you can deal with them in a moment. Okay, last one. Like that, and then pull it through. And yeah, you can see you want to do, you would like to have more garter stitch because it just wants to flip in. But that's out of the way. So that gives you a little idea, and you can see we've got this horrible end in the way. But all I do anyway is this ones with your pattern colour, just kind of move them out of the way. And I have actually done this as I go through it. I take two rows and tie them together in a double knot. Where did I go up to? So I've done up to here. So I just take them, pull it tight, and then pull it tight again. And then for these, your pattern ones, I just tie a knot at the end, like that, because you want it to be as tight at the end of the pattern as you can. Where did I put? Oh yeah. And then basically, yeah, you just tie all your knots, tie your knot in there, and then cut it off. And what you can do different times with different ones, depends how I'm feeling. If I'm feeling like being kind of fancy, then I will weave in the background. Let me get yeah, sometimes I've done it with this one too. So you just take your pattern colour and just weave it in, so then they're all at the end. Sometimes I don't do that. I haven't done that here. You just want to make sure you tie a knot in your background ones. Yeah, there. So we'll do it with this one. I would do this before I trim it, and then it's not such a big thing. Yeah, so you could do that the whole way down, and that would take your pattern colour out to the edge with this one. Just checking, so I've left this. Right, so we'll tie off this one. So tie it I just do it twice just to make sure it doesn't unravel. And you might end up with a rogue one end that doesn't have a 2 to tie it to, but just tie it, like just tie a knot in it to the end. Or tie it to the last 2 that you tied. It's no big deal. And then so I'll tie this bit. It's not none of it's hard, but it's just fiddly because it all wants to just like spring away from you, so you just have to kind of hold it down. And for washing, I mean, they always say you need to wash it in the same way that you do, like you would with the finished garment, but I don't really stress out too much about that. You just kind of want to get it totally wet and kind of wring it out a bit. So once we have finished this, I'll go and do that. So I just lie it flat. And snip it off. So it's all the same length. Okay, so I'll go and wet this bit and then we'll come back and we'll pin it out. Okay, so I've wet it and I wrung it out, just kind of patted it so it's just not dripping wet. And I've got these little mats that you can get from Amazon or eBay or anywhere, and it's kind of like floor mats, and they're just foam and then they interlock together and you can get different amounts. So I use these quite a lot for blocking stuff, things that don't really fit with a jumper board or things like that. So I use these things, and they're quite good as well because they have kind of lines and lines that you can use to kind of help you line things up. And then I have these Knit Pro knit blockers. So they're good because they're like little plastic things with the pins already in them, like equally spaced out, so then you don't have to try and do it properly. So usually I'll put one in the top, and you don't want to like stretch it, but you need to give it a bit of a pull so that you kind of get your, and these are really good because you can see you're just you can really get nice and lined up. And then so they have these longer ones and then these shorter ones that work for and like that. And then I kind of comb out my little ends, make sure they're lying nice and flat. And then yeah, so that's kind of how it ends up. And then depending on if you have underfloor heating, just lay this on the floor or lay it on a table. And it should be dry. And then you can take off your little pins and then you'll be left with, obviously not the exact same, but something like this that you can then measure, check your gauge is right on, or you can look at, decide that you hate the colours, do it again, or you can look at it and think, yes, that's perfect. And then you can start your project and know that you like the colours and that it will all look good. So I hope that's been interesting, informative, and yeah, we have more videos that you can find on our Jamieson Smith YouTube channel, and yeah, thanks for watching.